All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Pianist Academy. Thanks for joining me this morning. We've got a handful of people in the house already. So good to see you. And thanks, Tiago. Tiago's here. Welcome, Tiago. Welcome, Sue. Awesome. Good to see both of you. If you haven't dropped your name in the chat, please say hi and let us know where you're tuning in from. Actually, Tiago and Sue, could you could you kick us off with that? Could you tell us where you're tuning in from? That would be awesome. We have, hey, Ser Woolsley's here. Good evening. Well, good morning, good evening. As always, it's 10 o'clock where I am. Sue's in California, so that's 9 o'clock in the morning. Tiago's in London. Tiago, what time is it in London? Because this morning, I guess, who am I kidding? I drink coffee all day long. So whether it's 10 o'clock a.m. or 10 o'clock p.m., I've got a cup of coffee in my hand. All right, we've got 5 p.m., Tiago says, 5 p.m. in London. Very, very cool, awesome. And Haydar is here. Welcome, Haydar. He says, good evening from Baghdad. So it's probably much later than 5 p.m. in Baghdad. What time is it in Baghdad, Haydar? And Jeffrey, 8 p.m. in Baghdad. And Jeffrey, hello, Jeffrey. He says, Philadelphia. Welcome, everybody. This is great. Actually, did we all chime in? I see we've got 6 people watching right now. So that's awesome. I think, did everybody say hi? Awesome. We have a very exciting beginning of today's live stream. So I have 2 video submissions that we're going to share and chat about together. And the first is from Tiago, who has said hello. Tiago's in London. It's Tiago's first submission. And he sent me an email and he said he's finishing up his first year playing the piano. So first off, congrats, Tiago. Congrats for sticking with it for a year. And you're getting ready for like a first year recital, right? So he wanted to share one of the pieces he's putting together for that, which is Chopin's Prelude in E Minor, Opus 28, number 4. The very, very, very famous, maybe one of the most famous in the entire set of preludes. So we're going to tackle Tiago's submission first. Year 1, he says. Yes, awesome. And then Ser Woolsley sent in a little update of himself, also playing a Chopin prelude, the Prelude in A, number 7 in the set of Opus 28. So we're going to see Ser Woolsley's update in, who knows, maybe 20 minutes or so, something like that. Yes, Haydar says, way to go, Tiago. I totally agree. Way to go. And let's just jump in. Here we go. So let me pull up Tiago's playing of the Prelude in E minor, Opus 28, number 4. Oh, beautiful, beautiful, Tiago. Let's give Tiago a round of applause for that. And thank you so much for sharing that, Tiago. Tiago says, you can say right off the bat, beginner difficulty number 1 is pressing chord keys evenly. I'll give you a couple tips on that, Tiago. But first off, let's celebrate a little bit. Give Tiago a round of applause and a comment in the chat, please. Because really a lot of beautiful stuff happening there. Let's tackle some of that first. Seems like, and this is something I know that a couple people that are tuned in here, we talk about the bridge and position and all that a lot. So Tiago, it seems like you've got that really nicely under control. We don't have too much curve, not too little curve. One thing, jumping into a tip right now, one thing that actually might help with the key depressions, and usually I'm advising people the opposite of this here, but one thing that might help is in the left hand, if you do have a little bit more curve in the fingers, we're going to be able to depress those with a little bit more control, right? Than if we're really spread out. I'm using the word really. Take that with a grain of salt. But the more, right, if we have a little bit more roundedness in the fingers, we're going to be able to play these chords a little bit more evenly throughout the whole piece. But I would say, Tiago, that is three things that are the most difficult about this prelude in particular. It is one of the easier ones in the set, but emotionally, it is incredibly challenging to play this prelude really well. So one of the, let's say, sum up 3 difficult things. Knowing what to do with every melody note. We're going to talk about that in a second. Knowing what the hairpins in the music mean. Hadar was talking about pedaling. We're going to talk a little bit about pedaling as well. And then also, having some control in the left hand. I think those are going to be the general 3 things that we dive into today on this. But let's see where it goes. So we're just going to start from... let me give you, before we start from the top, that's where I thought we were going to start. Let me give you a couple other things, Tiago. Wherever we have the appoggiaturas in the piece, so measure 11, and actually, I can show you on the score here as well. Okay. I know this one doesn't have measure numbers, but if we look at the first place, we have an appoggiatura. It's in the second system of what I'm showing here, second to last bar. It's from that B to A. Tiago says it's also controversial in interpretation. It is. The B to the A, that is in, I'm kind of circling with my cursor there. That is, the appoggiatura should come on the beat with the left hand. So if I show you what that is, if we're right in that measure 11, so here we're in A minor. So the B is going to happen with the left hand. Like that. And then where this happens again later in the piece, it's the same 2 pitches in measure 19. 2, 3, 4. So they're not grace notes like we would normally interpret in the most modern music, right? Okay, now let me actually jump before we go back to the beginning. We're going to jump to the last 3 measures, because what I'm going to show you about the last 3 chords, 2 measures. What I'm going to show you about these is something that I think we can use a little bit of throughout the whole piece to help the left hand out. These chords, especially the right hand, the first chord in the right hand is pretty spread, right? E, F sharp, B, E. And playing that as one can be really difficult, especially at a pianissimo dynamic. Second chord as well, with the second finger of the left hand, I think is the most difficult one. And then, of course, the last. So what I'd like to show you, Tiago, is especially start off trying this out in these last 3 chords. But if you can feel like instead of kind of keeping everything very firm in the wrist and in the forearm and all of that, and then trying to depress slowly, which may or may not work for you. What I'd advise is actually a little bit of a kind of a pulling down, almost feeling like we're pulling the fingers down and into the keys from the elbow. So if it's going to be a very subtle difference in what it looks like, but it feels different to play. So if I pull down from here, the wrist is going to depress a little bit as a result of that, and I can play that very softly. That one wasn't quite as good, but because I'm not just trying to activate fingers down and kind of hold everything in one place, and if I do that, then everything kind of breaks apart, right? And depending on the piano you have, and on a digital, it's always going to stay in pretty good regulation. It's not really going to change over time. But this can be extraordinarily difficult to play depending on the piano you get. So if you're out performing somewhere, those last 2 bars, if you have a minute or 2 to try the piano out before you play a piece of music, these last chords are going to be super important to try to experience and let the piano tell you what it needs so that we can play these. And in some cases, you simply might have to play them out a little bit more. And that's another thing that's okay. Tiago, I'm going to give you a lot of really advanced tips. So take them as you go and as you continue to learn. And I was just laughing about Haydar's comment. He just sent me his first public performance. Well, that's super awesome, Haydar. That's super awesome. I'll have to take a look. So Tiago, I'm going to give you a lot of really advanced tips and comments, and so try to implement them just a little bit at a time, because it's my job to help you and take things to the next level and keep things going and going, but don't let that dissuade you from the tremendous progress you've made on the piece so far, and especially just playing after 1 year. Really, really, really good stuff happening. So if we take this advice that I was showing you in the right hand and we go back to the first measure, we can feel that, especially on the first eighth of the piece in the left hand, and then every time chords change, the harmony changes, we can really feel like we're using some of the elbow to pull us in and down into the keys. Rodrigo asked what piece we're talking about. We just listened to Tiago's submission of Chopin's Prelude in E minor, Opus 28, number 4. So I'm giving him a bunch of tips on yes. Okay, there we go. Everybody answered for me. Awesome. So Tiago, if we can keep that kind of feeling so that our hand doesn't get stuck and kind of locked into one place. Next thing to try, since we're on the topic of left hand, keeping things together and playing really softly, try out on your piano. I wish I knew this about, I think you have a clavinova is what it looked like, right? So it's quite a nice instrument for a digital, and actually one of my in-person students has the exact same model, I think. So I have played it before. But tell me if the piano, do you need to release the keys all the way in order for the note to re-trigger? Or can you release the key part of a way? Let's see if you can see this. Can you release it halfway and still play another note like that? So I haven't let the key all the way return to the top, right? Uprights, this is usually not possible to do on an upright piano simply because of the design. Tiago says, I know the tip you're mentioning. Yeah, so if you can, leave your hand, continue to have your fingers kind of connected to the keys, and don't let them, you say you try to play that way regardless. Well, in this piece in particular, in the left hand, that could be a really great thing. And Tiago says, it releases the sound. Yes. So we want the pedal down to make sure that we're not releasing. Whoops, there we go. So I'm really trying to find the point, and it's different on every instrument, the point where I can re-articulate the note, because I have to lift to a certain point. Otherwise I have to put kind of a lot of force and it's hard to control. Okay, those are some good left hand tips for you. So let's jump back into some more interpretive and connecting emotionally tips for you. So first off, Tiago, let me know. Thanks to Seymour Bernstein on YouTube, there is a super valuable piece of information about Chopin's music and romantic music in general that usually had been reserved for people that were studying at a super high level. So, Tiago, have you seen Seymour Bernstein's lesson on this piece? Let me know in the comments, because if you have, I'll only touch on this a tiny bit, and if you haven't, I'll go a little bit more in depth. Okay, good. So Tiago says yes. What I'm going to mention is the hairpins in Chopin's music and in other music of the period are not dynamic markings. They're markings of rubato. They're markings of accelerando and ritardando, if you will. So where we get the first of those, there are many throughout the piece. And usually, this is one way that you can really know if you're interpreting Chopin's markings correctly. There are so many bars where there is a dynamic marking and a hairpin next to one another. If you see those two things, you automatically should know or should realize that they mean two different things. One of them is relating to dynamics and the other is relating to something else. In this case, it's the push and pull. Tiago, you said it's your favorite performance. Which performance are you talking about? The one, his more recent one, or there's one that I think he played, I think it was live, that's incredibly slow. It's like an entire minute longer than his other performance that's on YouTube. So that's one on the same video. Okay. Yeah, great. So that one's a bit quicker. He has another performance. If you want to go look this up, Tiago, he has another performance that's really about this tempo. It's incredibly slow. So like I said, it's about a minute longer. You can see if that's still something that resonates with you or not. Related to tempo, I'm going to throw the score back up on the screen. You'll notice the tempo marking. So actually, you mentioned Trifonov. I'm actually going to bring him up right now because the tempo marking is largo, but look at the meter. The meter is written as cut time. So cut time, while it looks like 4/4, is not 4/4. 4/4 we'd be counting 4 beats per bar, and largo would pertain to 4 beats per bar. We'd have 4 beats at a slow largo tempo. In cut time, it's largo at 2 beats per bar. So this is part of the controversy that exists around this piece in particular, because if we play largo, let me pull up a metronome. If we play largo, let's put it at a slow largo, like 40 beats per minute. But in this tempo, there are 4 eighth notes. So even though that sounds slow, in cut time we only feel 2 beats. Which is much faster than most people play it. So that is one thing just to keep in mind. If we don't like that sort of interpretation, okay, I wouldn't ask any student to do that. But it would be really good to experience playing it in that way. Even if we disagree with our performance, it'd be eye-opening to experience it that way. If Chopin intended to count 4 beats, he would have written it in 4/4, not in cut time. So there is something there that we should be aware of. Even if we take it slower in a more traditional tempo, we're still only feeling 2 pulses per bar. So the pulses are very, very far apart. Now, if we continue talking about tempo, one of the editions that is usually taken seriously about the Chopin preludes, the Kohler edition, lists a metronome marking of this piece at 66 to the quarter note, which is about here. And of course, there'll be rubato around that. And the more that you look at other recordings of this piece of music in particular, typically, the older the pianist is, or the further away the generation of the era of pianist is. If we go back to like Rubinstein, he plays this whole piece in under 2 minutes. And he does play it at about 66, I think, to the quarter note. And as we come further and further forward and away from Chopin's time, people have slowed it down and slowed it down and slowed it down. I don't know if there's something to be said about the great pianists of 100 years ago and if they had that direct connection or a very close, maybe only separated by one person, connection to Chopin himself, and if that influenced their interpretation. Okay, enough about tempo. We can choose a tempo that we like, but be sure and experience the opposite, because when it comes to playing the right hand, this extremely long phrase, the slower we play, the harder it is to make connection through all of those pitches. To the point where if we're taking, like Bernstein's recording, if we're taking about 3 minutes to get through this piece that other people take 2 minutes to get through, there's a huge difference in tempo. It is so much more difficult to make this note connect to that one. It's really hard to play that precisely legato and in a nice linear way, right? So that's why it's really important to experiment, feel what it's like to push the tempo faster than what you might want to perform it at, because it will inform you of what the connection actually feels like when we do bring them together. Right? Okay. The next thing, Tiago, that I'd like to bring up throughout this opening of the piece, but it pertains to everything. I would challenge you, how different can you make each sighing motion so that we're not hearing the same, especially on the C, so that we're not hearing the same motion once, twice, 3 times, and then when the notes change even, so that we're not hearing the same thing over and over and over and over again. Do we want to start the whole phrase off a little bit more? And then a little less? And then even less? And then kind of restarting as we come to A. Right? That's one possible way to make this go, but we're creating a really, really long line out of this so that we don't have too much, right? And then the same. Right? So everything we can do to avoid that kind of playing, great. The next thing I'd like to bring up. So getting into kind of right before the main section, variation. Yeah, Tiago says variation on the 2-note slur. Yeah, more variation. You have a lot of freedom. I played it in one direction, kind of descending the whole way. Right now, in this moment, I like that interpretation. Mine might even change depending on the mood I'm in and the day it is and whatnot. But yes, if we have a plan, because at the beginning of the phrase, we have to know what the plan for the phrase is. If we know what the plan for the whole phrase is, then we can decide how piano are the first notes. If they're really quiet, then we can grow. It's still a sighing motion. So each one is a sighing motion. But if I start quiet, then it opens up the door to say, after the first one, the second one can be a little bit more present. The third one can be more present. And then the next one, the last time we hear the notes, maybe is the most painful, right? That's one of the things that's, one of the emotions that's usually associated with this piece is pain, suffering. The piece was played at Chopin's funeral, actually. And he wrote it very near the end of his life. So, yeah, Tiago, perfect. Keep that in mind. We can vary, and there are so many different ways that we can vary our interpretation of the two-note slur. But at the same time, there's still a reason that Chopin wrote one marking from bar 1 all the way to bar 8, because they still need to fit in a single idea, right? Okay, let's move on. I'm looking at bar 12. There's a great opportunity here. Two things about this bar, actually. Yeah, I'll put the score back up on the screen. So bar 12 is the last bar of the second system on the screen right now. And it has this thing that looks like an accent mark. And it's over the C natural. Tiago, if you've listened to other tutorials on this piece, you probably also know that in Chopin's music, those long accent marks are not actually accents. Or they're not dynamic accents. They are accents of emotion or intention. So I almost consider it to be a little bit more digestible. It's almost like a tenuto mark, but it has more meaning than a tenuto mark, right? So it can be a place that we spend a lot of time really feeling how in the first beat of the bar, first 4/8 notes, that C resolves to B. Can we really feel that resolution? I lost it. Right? Almost like there's a retard. And then coming out of it. Even better, Tiago, can you attach an emotion? Can you attach an adjective to that note in particular? What does it mean to you? How do you feel about it? At least one word. Can you attach 3 words or something like that to that note? What does it mean? And then what does it mean when we leave it and go to B? I'm holding the chord in the left hand right now, which I probably wouldn't do in performance, but just to hear that resolution from that dissonance down to B natural, right? Okay, leading out of this bar, Tiago says, I need to learn how to sing. Actually, did you see my short, Tiago, that I posted? I think it was almost 2 weeks ago now, a week and a half ago. It is exactly on that. Okay, leading out of this bar, we have a crescendo marking. Well, okay, it's an opening hairpin. So again, on the score, it's opening at the end of measure 12, opening hairpin. We know from talking about this earlier and from watching Seymour that opening hairpin means speeding up. So speeding up into the next phrase, right? Now, because that marking is there, we probably have to do something. This plays into what we just talked about with that accent mark too. We probably have to do something to bring the tempo down to a place, or bring our rubato down to a place, so that we can expand and not have it be so out of context, right? So leading in from bar 11, yeah? So how can we push and pull the tempo? Give us some space that we can bring the mood down a little bit, and then push our way out of it. Right? Now, I love playing the next section out more. So I'd really encourage you to do that and explore a different emotion. Why are we repeating for some of these bars, it's almost the exact same music that we had at the beginning. It's not just a repeat of sadness. Bunny is saying sadness, longing, hope. And you're finally out alive. Great, welcome. So it's not just the same as the beginning. I would say it's not as depressed. It's not as sorrowful. But instead, because of where we're going to go, so I like playing this out more and a little bit quicker. It gives us so much room to expand into the climax of the piece, right? And in fact, right on measure 16, again, I'll show it on screen. So 16 is the, by the way, I'm not reading off of this. This score is the Breitkopf and Hartel, which is actually the first German edition of the piece. So it's close to being like the autograph manuscript. Above bar 16, which is the second to last bar on the bottom system that you can currently see, it says stretto. And stretto means, can anybody tell me? I love asking questions of my students, and some of them get very frustrated with me because I don't tell them. Somebody chime in. What does stretto mean? Rachmaninoff is back. In the meantime, I see also Scott. I didn't get a chance to say hi to Scott. So Scott Weaver, thanks for tuning in, especially if you're still here, Scott. Somebody who knows what stretto means? Tiago, I hope you can answer that one. We'll give it 10 more seconds. Anybody? Okay, Tiago says in your language it means straight. Interesting. That is interesting. And Bunny says a quicker time. Yes, so in Italian, stretto would mean pushing forward. It's faster. So that marking, which is also in the autograph, it's in the original manuscript, he wrote stretto. A lot of pianists also lead into that by creating this movement a little bit more in advance, right? The interesting thing, stretto is marked here. And there's also a plethora of hairpins around this point. There's hairpins pushing us forward, and there's hairpins pulling us back, and then pushing us forward again, and pulling us back. There's more markings in these 3 bars surrounding this area than anywhere else in the entire piece. But they all need to be taken with the idea that we're actually moving faster than the largo tempo that we started with. So we're pushing forward to stretto. And now, once we hit that G, we should be firmly feeling this kind of in a new pulse that's much quicker. So even when we pull back into this big chord, right? That it's still faster than how we would have played the opening. Right? If I play those side by side. Right? No, we don't ever get a marking that leads us away from stretto. We don't get a reestablishment of tempo primo or something like that. But we do have a very long closing hairpin, which is going to tell us get slower, get slower. The diminuendo, this is super interesting, I think. A lot of people don't play it this way. Sergei, yes, it's Prelude 28, number 4. A lot of people don't play it this way, but forte is established in 17 at the beginning of this. Now, the line itself, the melody line descends, right? Which typically we think about bringing the dynamic down. But something to think about, Tiago, that I think would be a very viable interpretation that you don't hear very often, is actually to keep the dynamic high until the diminuendo that's marked at the end of 18. So, showing that on the screen to everybody, we have stretto right in kind of the middle of the screen. We have the ornament up to that high G, new tempo. That closing hairpin at the end of the last bar of the second system should really be connected to the next one on the next line. They're the same graphical representation. It's the same unit. It's not like we're having two closing. Right? And then the stretto dotted line that exists over stretto also exists all the way until piano. So then, I guess we could say, when we reach the piano dynamic, second bar, third system here, that's when we're back in our tempo primo for sure, for sure. But going back to the dynamics, forte is marked on the E with the big octave B in the bass. We don't have another dynamic marked until the diminuendo, right? And a lot of people, and I just did it too because it feels natural, a lot of people start to diminuendo here while they slow down. But what if we don't do that? What if we only change the tempo or change our rubato let it resolve and then I'm being pretty liberal with my rubato, but to make a point, right? That could be a really, really cool way of interpreting this that you don't hear super often. It would really make it unique. And I think there is incredible validation for it in the score itself. Chopin would have marked, he could have easily put diminuendo where the hairpin starts to close, but he doesn't do that. So it's another one of those questions. If he didn't do that, there's probably a reason why. Great. So going back to your performance of it, Tiago, I'd really love to hear a little bit more push forward in this real build of anguish, really. Right? And then even at the end of this phrase, Chopin's such a masterful composer. Even with such simple material, we have this that ends the triplets. Da-da, A to F sharp. We have the same material. A to F sharp. And then with slight variation, A to F sharp with the partitura. Anytime a composer says something 3 times, it's really important. And how many people talk to themselves when you're alone? None of us ever want to admit that. I can tell you I'm not talking completely to myself, but I'm the only one in the room here, and I'm talking to all of you, but it's a little different, I guess. Even if we just have thoughts and we don't express them out loud or something like that, when we have thoughts about something and they repeat, it's what I like to tell my students is it's an insistence. It's an insistence. And a musical way of writing insistence or persistence or this idea that just won't leave us is by doing the same thing over and over again. Just like what happens in our mind with whatever words we have. What is the reason that we have that movement from A to F sharp 3 times in a row? It's not just mirroring. It is, which is part of what makes Chopin such a great composer. But the meaning in those 2 different places are different, right? See, Tiago says, right now, a lot of your dynamics are lost in the insecurity of landing the left-hand chords correctly. Yeah. Yeah, I understand that, Tiago. I understand a little bit of hesitation. Hesitation or that nervousness can prevent us from really expressing what we want to, or what we even really feel like we want to. I would recommend, Tiago, great practice is always about we want to get everything right as much as possible, right? But sometimes we need to take some risks. And in this case, those risks might be, I need to let my left arm and left hand be free. I just need to let the music happen, and let's see what happens. And maybe that is easier said than done, especially when you're recording. But spend some time, a brief amount of time while you practice, even if it's in short bits and not through the whole piece. Experiment and let things feel more free, where we're not so we're not kind of gripping chords. As Thiago says, rec syndrome or recording syndrome, yeah. Where we're not gripping and we're not trying to precisely put our hand where it needs to go before we play. Anytime we've got a big movement, even small ones, all that time and all that brain energy, the mental energy that we spend shifting one hand and then checking the fingers and double checking the fingers, it's pulling us out of the most important thing, which is really feeling the line the music is creating. So if we can get in the habit of sometimes, once we know a piece well, can we break that habit a little bit? Take those risks when no one's watching. Start with that. And then the more and more comfortable you get with that, the more we feel like we can do that when we're recording or when we're playing for other people, performing live, anything like that. So I think I'm going to leave it there today, Tiago. I thought I was going to spend 20 minutes and it's been 40. But I hope this was a big help for you. And there's really so much to talk about in this piece. So first off, really lovely job. You're not even at a year of playing yet and you're tackling this. So that's first super awesome. Congratulations on that. And secondly, yeah, can we have more variation in those two-note slurs? Can we attach some emotions? Can we attach some specific adjectives to different, even single notes, like we mentioned about the expression mark, the thing that looks like an accent? Can we attach words like that to individual phrases? How does the first statement of all of that, how does that differ emotionally from the second statement of it as we lead into the stretto, right? And then we talked about a couple of those technical things, letting the forearm pull down so that we can articulate all of those notes at the same time, right? Yes. Yes, that's perfect, Thiago. I think that's I think that sums it up. Yes. So thank you so much for sending in. And congratulations on sending your first one in. That's great. And please send more. I'd love to hear more from you. And I think everybody here on the channel would love to as well. So yeah. And thanks, Haydar, for the applause and the comments. All right. We're going to do a quick check-in on... Absolutely, Tiago. Absolutely. My pleasure. We're going to do a quick check-in on Ser Woolsley's Prelude. I shouldn't close that book. It's just a couple pages later. We're going to listen to Ser Woolsley playing Prelude in A major, number 7 in the same set. So let me pull that up real quick. Bunny is asking, what is that book? My book of preludes, it's pretty, I actually find it quite good. It's not edited by Jan Ekier, which is what I usually recommend. It's just the Alfred Chopin Preludes book. But it does actually have a lot of, the preface is great. It's got a lot of information that references the manuscript. And the editor's marks that aren't a part of the... that weren't a part of the manuscript, they are clearly defined as different. So the editor's marks are either, they're usually in like a light gray instead of in black on the page. So you can clearly see what Chopin's markings were and what the editor has advised in the sense, well, two things. Oh yeah, this is important. The preludes were all written on a small upright piano that was straight strung. So especially since we're talking about two different preludes. So first off, it wasn't a grand, and even the grands of Chopin's time didn't resonate and produce sound nearly as efficiently as the modern piano does. So if you see pedal markings in Chopin's music, we really need to be careful and to make adjustments, because the markings that worked for his pianos, they're going to be very different than what works for our modern piano. Same thing, part of the reason, this leads back to that first question of tempo that we talked about with the Prelude in E. Part of the reason maybe Chopin wrote it in cut time was because on his piano, this B wouldn't have continued to sound. It would have been long gone. The resonance and the vibration would have been long gone by now. On this piano, which isn't even a 9-footer, it's still going. So because of that, that could be a great reason why Chopin maybe would have played this because if he played it any slower, the melody would have been completely lost on his instrument. So does that mean we can't play it differently today? That's almost like a question about how we play Bach, since we have a piano and Bach didn't even write for piano. I'm not going to get into that. But it's a beautiful, beautiful piece, and there's lots of ways. Yeah, of course, Bunny. Well, before we move on to Ser Woolsey, Scott has a question. Do you agree with Bernstein that Chopin never indicated when to lift pedal? That's not quite always true. He did indicate some pedal lifts with the thing that looks either like the coda symbol or a little star-like symbol. In this piece, the manuscript does have pedal written in a couple places, but not throughout the entire rest of the piece. And that is because, coming from a composer myself, I show people where to pedal differently than, let's say, what would be standard or accepted. So Chopin, writing for even for his students would have been intermediate to advanced players. They all would have known the intricacies of pedaling already, probably pretty well. And pedaling wasn't quite as difficult of an art as it is today on the modern piano, because the resonance would go away much more quickly. So how often you'd have to clear things, it would be a lot less often, right? But we don't get any pedal marking throughout the entire Prelude in E except in two measures of it. And in those cases, it's to really be sure that we don't blur things too much. So the pedal is marked. That's under one pedal. Supposed to be, it's in the manuscript like that. And then the pedal lifts. That doesn't mean it doesn't come back down. It just means we go back to normal pedaling. And then we have under one pedal marked here. That triplet is under one pedal. And then we go back to normal pedaling. So I hope that answers your question, Scott, about this piece in particular. I don't like to give a general statement about Chopin without doing a little bit more research into individual pieces and what he wrote in the manuscript first. But in this particular case, that's absolutely what that means. We still use pedal throughout the rest of the piece. Tiago says, it's still controversial. Yeah. If it's, the best thing you can do, Tiago, is make it authentic to you and how you feel. If you try to create something that doesn't resonate with you, it's never going to resonate with anybody else that hears it. And especially on a piece where there is so much, there's such a variety and there's such a great divide between interpretations. I don't think anybody can really, if you feel convinced, I don't think anybody really has a right to tell you it's wrong. We can refine things, and that's different, but right and wrong is a whole different story. And in some music, there is really like a cut and dry way that this is how it works, and this is one of 2 ways or 3 ways or something like that. But the Prelude in E is not one of those pieces. So it's also the reason why most concert pianists actually say it's one of the most difficult preludes to play. If people have an idea of what it's supposed to be about and your playing doesn't align with their idea of it, they're not going to like it. And everybody has such a wide variety of ideas, so it's very difficult in that sense, and it's very difficult to connect with emotionally. So go that direction, connect, be authentic, and that's going to come across to people more than anything else, more than trying to replicate one style over another style or one person's interpretation and using that as a guide. That's great to start with, but once that has become internalized, let's move away, and really make it our own piece. Okay, jumping forward. Ser Woolsley, Prelude in A major. I've got it queued up. All right, here we go. All right. Great job, Ser Woolsley. Let's give Ser Woolsley a little round of applause in the chat, can we? Thanks for sharing. Ser Woolsley, how long have you been working on this piece in particular? He says, I already know what's coming after you listen to yourself one more time. Well, first, congratulations, Ser Woolsley. Nice work. And how long have you been playing it? Because I think you submitted this a little while ago, and you're working on a couple things in the meantime. So let me know in the chat when you can. First comment for you, Ser Woolsley. Let's make sure that we don't hold the dissonant pickups in the pedal when we land on the our downbeats of each bar. So for example, I didn't grab the sheet music to show this one ahead of time, but from the first bar to the second bar, we can get away with holding the pedal down for that whole thing. The next bar, if we put the pedal down on this, the D and the F sharp, and then hold it, we have a whole lot of blur going on, right? So we need to be really, really, really careful. What I like to do is have one pedal for the D and F sharp, and then a new pedal for the, it's almost like a suspension. It doesn't resolve down, but resolves up. One pedal for that, and then a new pedal, so that we're not blurring this or this into the A major harmony. Same thing in all the rest of the bars that are going to be coming. New pedal, and then the 16th, maybe not a new pedal, but then a new pedal. We take a new pedal once the harmony, once we feel like it's we've arrived. So new pedal, keep it, and then new pedal. So if I play that without talking so much. And then somewhere different, because we're building Make sense, Sir Woolsey? He says playing from September 2022. Yeah, you keep playing it. Hadar asks, you don't understand the piece. Is it a conversation? I think it's pretty simple. I think it's pretty simple. I think about it like it's a stroll in the park. It's just a pleasant day, and there's a little breeze. The flowers are blowing in the breeze. We've got some fluffy clouds in the sky. And this is just kind of playing in the background while we walk through the park. Just very pleasant. So that relates to the second comment I have for you, Sir Woolsey, is I think it can speed up a little bit. Should feel like a nice walking pace, like a comfortable walking pace. And keep it a little bit brighter. Yeah, does that make sense? Not tone-wise brighter, but just the feel of it is a little bit more lighthearted. Yeah, and a lot of that can simply happen by speeding up just a little bit. Again, you hear a whole variety of tempi for this prelude also, just like the E minor one we talked about. So keep that pedaling clean. Speaking of pedaling, and this, we've had a bit of a conversation about that today. The original manuscript for this prelude shows one pedal depressed from here. And again, no pedal, and then one pedal. Now, the whole reason I'm disagreeing with that is the same reason we talked about before. These were written for a small upright piano, on a small upright piano that did not have long sustain and great resonance. So, what Chopin wrote probably wouldn't have blurred, or especially here, we wouldn't have heard this continue into the A major harmony. So in order to make it work more like what Chopin intended, we actually have to disobey his pedal marks. The idea is just that we're still creating the sound he wanted. The way we have to execute it has to be a little bit different than what he marked. Last thing, Sir Woolsey. And then if you've got questions, I know we've been here an hour and I haven't opened it up to any questions, but if you've got questions, think about anything that you might want to ask. Last thing, Sir Woolsey, as we lead into measure 11, measure 12, the climax, when we play this massive chord that has C sharp on the top, really be sure that you re-articulate the C sharp. Because we want to hear that go all the way to the end of the phrase. And simply because it's such a huge chord, it's great that you can reach it. That's really cool. A lot of people can't, and they play, or yeah, they roll. In that case, if you play it with the left hand, it's easy to bring out the C sharp. If we don't roll and we play everything, it's really hard to bring out C sharp. So make sure that we keep listening for that it's there. Yeah? Okay, cool. I think it's great work, Ser Woolsley. Keep on playing it, and see what happens, over the course of months and years even, as you just keep playing it for fun. But in the meantime, think about that pedaling, and the byproduct of feeling more lighthearted will be an increase in tempo. So maybe if you think more about the emotion first, or the scene that I kind of painted, then that tempo is going to follow, or it's going to be, like we talked about with Thiago, it's going to be just more authentic and more convincing. Ser Woolsey says, I tried some half pedaling after the big chord. Let me see if I can hear what you're talking about. Hold on a second. this a try. Yeah, you're talking about in this bar with a B minor. More successful, yes. It's really, really hard to find that point because we really don't want to hear after the initial downbeat. We don't want to hear that A sharp anymore. That's in the first chord. So, however much pedal we need to take to get rid of the A sharp, that's how much we should pedal. So be sure and listen for that if you're thinking about half pedaling or something like that. But yeah, I think overall that's successful, and you can do more of that kind of pedaling throughout the other bars, just to make sure that first, the downbeat, that's always where we have our dissonance that we then leave, to be sure that that's not muddying and clouding up the harmony that we end up on. Right? Okay, cool. Let's see, Hadar said, what would happen if you try to play Chopin's E Minor Prelude in C sharp minor, and what would it sound like? Let me think about that for a second. In the meantime, let's give Ser Woolsley a nice round of applause. Thanks for submitting again, Ser Woolsley. It's always great to hear you play, and it's always great to see your progress. So I love it. I will give it a shot, Hadar. I will try to transpose this real quick. Let's see. And we've got one on the top. Oh, man. Here we go. That is really hard to do, Hadar. C natural. Well, thanks for sticking around and listening to that. It's definitely different. Composers pick keys for a specific reason, for the tonal quality and parts on something. C sharp minor. It's different. Is it darker? Alexander says, yeah, the prelude in E minor. Yes, it is. It's much easier when I can just read it off the page. Hadar, do you want to transpose it, or you're just interested in hearing the difference? A really cool way, actually, of doing that that's a lot easier than doing it on the piano itself. Record a little bit on your MIDI keyboard or something like that in the original key that you've learned it in. And then transpose your recording of it down, 3 half steps. And you'll get you'll at least be able to hear the difference, and that would be a lot easier than transposing it on the spot. Tiago says you have a request for that's probably the first nocturne, Opus 9, number 1. Tiago, I will get there at some point. The first nocturne masterclass that I'm going to do is actually, I think it's Opus 27. Speaking of C sharp minor, it's this one. Yeah, so I'm going to do a masterclass on that pretty soon. And then once that one is done and done, I'll see about playing Opus 9, number 1. Hadar says you can't transpose it; it's impossible. Well, then just do what I suggested. Play it in the original key, and then if we can punch a few buttons, or in your MIDI editor on your computer, even you can drag it down. Hadar loves C sharp minor. You've been playing Moonlight Sonata in C sharp minor also. You like that key, C sharp and D, because you were talking about Un Sospiro as well. Same tonal center, just the major variant of it. Interesting. Oh, cool. So, anybody? Let's take 10 more questions. I'll answer some 10 more minutes. I'll answer some quick questions if anybody has them. In the meantime, I wanted to ask all of you something that are here, and drop it in the chat. Do you think, this is inspired by something I've saw on Facebook the last few days, do you think that practicing the piano and or performing or recording, is it play or is it work? If you have to pick between the two, is it play or is it work? And then let's talk about why. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, so drop it in the chat. Or if you're watching afterward, drop it in the comments below too. Bunny asks, what do you think of improvising on these classic pieces? Oh, I think improvising on some of these pieces is extraordinarily difficult, but it is a very, very worthy cause. Because Chopin, especially Chopin's music, some of the classical composers and classical pianists, up until about the time of Chopin and Liszt, they were all master improvisers. They could all play in a variety of styles. They could sit down, they could improvise on their own material, they could improvise on other people's compositions. I don't remember what piece it was. I think it was one of Chopin's mazurkas. He played in a recital in a little, house party. That's how people used to have recitals. And then people loved it, and there was applause, and then he played an encore, and it was the same piece, but it was so different that people didn't even recognize what it was until he was nearly finished, because he took the same piece of music and he improvised so much differently around it, one of his own compositions. I know that I have another viewer here on the channel, Internet Privacy Advocate, who's not here today, or at least didn't chime in the chat. He is a super, he regularly tells me that he wishes the Chopin competition for piano included improvising, because Chopin did that. That was a huge part of his performance and of his composition. And in a way, I think that's really important. So yes, plus improvising, it kind of sparks the compositional brain, and it sparks some other thoughts about theory and how things work together, which can only help us to interpret a piece of music that much better. So Bunny, yes, if you, personally, I wouldn't probably perform in improv of a piece of music, like the two preludes. I don't know if I would do that. It depends on the audience, I guess. If it was an audience that was open to that, I might. But, a lot of staunch classical audiences would take a great exception to that. So Tiago, to answer, I think this is answering my question back to all of you. Piano is a hobby. You landed out of nowhere at 38. You wake up at 5 a.m. to play 3 hours every day. And that you're not that applied at your actual job. That's great. That is passion for you, right? That's awesome. 3 hours a day. That's really great, Tiago. Really, really great. So it sounds like you really enjoy it. And it's kind of an escape for you, if I'm interpreting that the right way. And Hadar has a similar comment. You started when you were 38, and now it's an endless love with piano. That's great. I'm really happy to hear that. Some others, if Bunny, let me know. Is piano practicing work or playtime? Oh, Tiago says side effect was nasty tendinitis. Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad my thoughts from before helped you with some of that. Also, what we talked about with letting the elbow and the forearm kind of keep the wrist mobile a little bit, that's going to help prevent tendinitis too. Tendinitis can really be caused by, if we're keeping a lot of this really too firm and locked up, that's one big thing that can cause tendinitis, or trying to make movements with the tendons through that tightness. Heider says, it's play, always play, because it's such a joy. I'm glad to hear that. Bunny says, hours of playing most every day. You're obsessed in retirement with piano. It's definitely playing. That's great. I love this. Very, very cool. I'm really glad to hear that from everybody. I think part of me, I'll share a little bit about mine, but it's what I do all day long. I don't get to practice all day long. I wish. That would be really, actually pretty nice probably. But music in general, maybe it's because it's what I do for a living, it usually feels a lot more like work, even when I'm practicing, especially when I'm performing. The end of a performance, like the encore, that usually feels like a lot of fun, and sometimes the second half is pretty fun, and the first half is very nerve-wracking. But yeah, I'm really glad to hear people that you just do it because you enjoy it, and that it spurs you on to spend so much time. I think that's really, really cool. Adar says, I demand an encore. Maybe I'll give you a little bit, unless there's a question. Hadar says Rachmaninoff. I don't have Rachmaninoff handy, Hadar. But since it's been a day of Chopin, and since I brought up the Nocturne, I probably won't play the whole thing for you. Oh, well, we'll see how it goes. So, okay, to close out today, I guess I'll play a little bit of Chopin's Nocturne, Opus 27, number 1. I haven't really practiced this since December, so wish me luck. Oh. Oh, I guess I had fun playing that. Well, thanks everybody for being a part of the stream today. Thanks for the submissions from Tiago and from Ser Woolsley. And thanks for the lovely comments at the end there during the performance. Thank you. Oh, thanks for the applause. Oh, we're going to call it a day today. And be sure if you want to submit your own playing, your own video, there's a link and little instructions for how to do that in the description below. So be sure and do that. And the next live stream will be March 8th, 2 weeks from today. And so I'll look forward to hopefully seeing many of you again on the 8th, 10 a.m. my time. You know what time it is for you. And yeah, thank you again so much for being here. Oh, it's your birthday, Bunny. Well, tune in and we'll sing happy birthday for you. How about that? Awesome. Well, thank you again, everybody, and wonderful playing. Keep practicing, keep enjoying it, and have a great day and have a great rest of your week. Practice smarter, not harder.